This is something that's recently come to my attention. I watched another video that kind of grazed over it, not for the same reasons that I'm making this video, but it was more about the applications involved. We are going to be talking about the apps. These applications are also the kind that have websites associated with them. I don't know how many of you have heard of this before. It's new to me. These are two websites that you can, buy things off of. One of them is Temu. I think Temu is actually the name of the app too. The other one is Shine. These are just two examples. I'm pretty sure there are probably more of these, probably a lot more. We're used to online shopping now, right? Like that's a thing. A lot of people do it. I do it on Amazon, GoPro.com, a couple of other websites, usually the manufacturer websites. Temu and Shine, the special thing about these, it's easy to see. That'd be the prices. $6.49 for an LED headlamp, okay? $20 for like a whole freaking patio umbrella. I mean, just look at the prices. We can go over to Shine and you'll see more of what I'm talking about. Here, we'll go to, I don't know, women's clothing. Seems to be really big on this website. I mean, you got like shorts for $7. Obviously, I don't buy women's clothing, okay? From the few times that I have bought women's clothing when I was in a relationship or whatever, I know that these prices, they're low, real low. So yeah, I mean, the prices, right, they range from very low to dirt cheap. I mean, you can look at the website yourself if you want to. You'll be amazed at some of the stuff you'll find on there. So what's the catch? How is that even possible to sell things like that for that cheap? Well, that's what this video is about, and it's a much bigger question than you might think. The quality of these items is probably very low. That being said, I mean, these items, they do need to work and they do need to do what they're designed to do, even if it's for a short while. Once you take that into consideration, along with the pricing, I mean, it seems pretty awesome, right? How is it possible? Well, in order to answer that question, we need to ask and answer some other questions. Where do these items come from? Where are they made? Who makes them? Where do you think they come from? If you immediately thought made in China, you're correct. Honestly, that was probably everybody's first instinct all along. Like I said, these aren't just websites you can access with a computer. They have apps. It's a safe bet that most people use the app version. We've all heard the stories about, how TikTok is illegally gathering users' data, etc., right? These apps are no different, okay? And are reportedly worse in some aspects. It's not a big shocker there. It's nothing new. Some people just don't know what any of that means or straight up don't care. I get it. Honestly, I do. It's kind of low on people's priorities, especially when they're getting merchandise at these kind of prices. There has to be a catch. And some people accept it. The problem is, the malicious aspects of the software are the least of the problems here. It gets much, much worse. So here in the United States, we are still attempting to at least make it appear as though we're operating in a free market. So in a free market, what happens when one seller undercuts another in their pricing? Basic economics. The lower prices will win out in a majority. Of course, you can only undercut so low in a free market because you have to balance, the seller's needs, right? Like you have overhead costs in a business, you have profit, you have wages, benefits, that kind of thing. You can only sell something so cheap before you start taking losses. The prices we're looking at on these websites, though, no free market seller can compete with this kind of undercutting. The difference is impossible to make up for. So again, I ask, how is it possible? Yeah, we're getting there. And this next part will probably clue you into where this is going, but not where it's going to end up. We've all heard some of the news stories about the Uyghur population in China, okay? I'm sure we have. I'm sure that, like me, most people have at least heard that China does bad things to Uyghurs. Most of us don't know exactly who they are, definitely don't know their entire history, all the details. I mean, we're not from China, okay? We don't know all that stuff. We're not going to get into the backstory of it, okay? That's not what this video is about, and I'm not here to learn about the Uyghurs and teach you about them. not the point of it. Now, you can look it up if you want, but let's just say they are a Muslim minority, and the Chinese government, it doesn't like them. That's putting it mildly, but you get the idea. They are a minority in China, okay? But there are millions of them. Since they refuse to fully go along with what the government of China tells its population to do and believe, the Chinese government has to take action to maintain some sort of control over their population. No matter what you might think of China, the Chinese government, they are communists, okay? Hence the CCP. It's in the name. That stands for the Chinese Communist Party. You can refute that if you want to, okay? You're free to do so, and I'm sure there are some people out there that probably will. But you're just wrong. And when I say you're wrong, I mean you're just basically not acknowledging objective truth. When we all think about communism, I think we all know how it's supposed to work versus how it actually works. It only works on paper, and history has taught us this over and over and over. This is also an objective truth. I'm not going to debate the virtues of communism with you. That argument has been put to rest for a long time now, and if you can't realize that, then I can't help you. Communism is bad. Once you introduce it to all the variables of human nature, that's when it goes south, and it goes south quick. We all know that, and if you don't know it, too bad. So how does an authoritarian state, such as a Communist Party, deal with the dissension of minorities? How do you think? There are many, many sources of information that tell the stories of what the Chinese government has done and is doing to the Uyghur population. One of those sources is the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. So we're going to take a look at that article now. Now, you all know I don't trust everything I read from the government. This is just one source. There are many, okay? We're just using this one as an example because I'm not going to go through multiple sources to prove a small point, and this is not what this video is about. If you want to look it up, you can. The government's campaign against the Uyghurs is multifaceted and systematic, which is to be expected. Communist. There's identity-based persecution because they are who they are. Genetically speaking, they're from a certain sect of people, a certain group, right? And we all know how that goes. Mass detention. Apparently this woman holds a picture of her sister, Dr. Gulshan Abbas, who has been detained by the Chinese government in an attempt to silence Rushan and discourage her activism for Uyghurs. The same day a talk Rushan gave about Uyghur persecution was posted on YouTube, her aunt, along with her sister, I guess in that photo there, disappeared from their homes in China. I mean, this is anecdotal, okay, one story. There are many. They surveil them. The Chinese government surveils the Uyghurs, of course. And then there's enforced sterilization, which is, evil, eugenics. And then we come down to this, forced labor. China has long forced Uyghurs to work in Xinjiang under a government program known in Uyghur as Hashar. Uyghurs in rural areas were forced to work in public work projects. Recently, researchers have documented a network of factories being built within and near detention camps in Xinjiang. In addition, leaked government documents reveal that working in these factories is a commonly imposed condition for release from said detention camps. Prisons, okay, basically is what that is. Uyghurs have no real choice but to work in these factories, often for low or no wages. Uyghurs are also being transferred in large groups to work at factories throughout China, so it's not just in the region. Right? They send them where they need them, whatever factory they need them in. Further isolates them from the families, communities. Academics have suggested the system of forced labor and the separation it causes, as part of the government's effort to fully assimilate the Uyghurs by breaking their traditional cultural bonds. So all this stuff in this article, it's bad, right? It's all bad. This little part at the end, though, is the important part. Forced labor. Laboring at what exactly? Manufacturing. They don't just put millions of people in prison and keep them there for the rest of their lives, right? Get nothing out of it. Why would they? That's right. Slave labor, manufacturing. So what might these people be forced to manufacture? Exactly what? Whatever it is they're making, it's going to be really cheap for them to make it. If you eliminate the wages and the benefits from a company's overhead costs, that immediately provides for a much larger profit margin. What that means is that company can afford to undercut all other competitors because they don't have to balance the cost of labor. They don't have retirements that they have to pay into, insurance, medical insurance, things like that. Things that a normal company might have to worry about with their workforce. If you completely eliminate that entire aspect of the cost of doing business, running your business, that makes your margin pretty big, really big, especially when compared to how the rest of the world, the free market, operates. How many of you would want to work for free? How many of you would want to work for free with the alternative being indefinite prison? It's not a good choice, but I know which one I would pick. I think that kind of answers the question of how these websites can exist. Don't get the wrong idea, okay? I'm not making this video to bring awareness about what China is doing to the Uyghur population. Slavery is bad. Communism is bad. China is bad. I'm sure you knew this before you clicked on this video. I'm not telling you to boycott Temu and Shine. You're an adult, right? Like, you can make your own decisions with the information you have. It's not like we can vote China out of existence. I mean, China is gonna China. Do what you think is right. Because the problem we're talking about is a little bit bigger than just, oh, I'm not gonna use Shine anymore. So why am I making this video? Yeah, it gets worse in a way that actually does concern us as Americans. You can make all the dirt cheap stuff that you want. You can use slaves to do it if you're in China. That doesn't mean really anything to the world at large unless you can actually sell that stuff. But who's going to buy it? Well, who can you undercut the most? You can ignore where the blender comes from and buy it at a third of the price. You didn't know. Does the US government have something to say about foreign manufacturers undercutting its own economy and homegrown businesses? Yeah, the US government does have something to say about that. You know what it is? You know what they have to say to China? Give us a cut. It's called an anti-dumping law. The US government has to protect its free market by keeping sellers like Temu from just dumping all their crap, all over the place. So how does the Commerce Department of the federal government do this? Well, it's complex, okay? It's a whole scheme of trying to ascertain the fair market value of items and adjusting import tariffs. They try and make up the difference somehow. Most of the ways they do this are total failures. They don't actually do what they're supposed to do, and we're going to get to that. But the whole process has been described as antiquated and ineffective. Sums up the United States government. That's exactly how you think it would go. Except it's a little worse than that in this situation, because you might already see the problem with this law, and if you do, good on you. The problem is import tariffs. You still get the dirt cheap item at a dirt cheap price. It just costs the seller, Temu and Shine, more to sell it to you. The extra more that the seller is paying, that's what they're paying to get it to you. Now, it wouldn't be much good if those costs directly passed on to you, because then you could just buy the same stuff over here, better quality, maybe for slightly higher price, maybe not, who knows. So who are they paying it to? It's in the name. Tariffs. The US government, okay? Basically an extra tax. The seller definitely sees it, okay? The game for the seller, though, it becomes, how do we negotiate a price with the overhead costs that we have, right? That's the same old question, same old problem of basic economics. When you don't have to worry about wages and benefits for your employees, gives you a very large margin. We've already talked about that. The US government, they know all of this, okay? They do. The Commerce Department, they're not sitting there scratching their heads wondering how the CCP can dump this stuff into our country and then just shrugging their shoulders and passing it off onto you. That's not what's happening here. That would be extremely naive for people to believe. They know where this stuff comes from. They know how it's made, and they don't care because they're getting paid taxes. So they play dumb. They take their cut. You get your cheap crap. The Chinese companies get paid, and everyone wins, right? Like, everybody wins, except, the slaves. They lose a lot. Here's the thing about it, man. There was a time in our country's history where we used slaves for manufacturing. We did. It was unconstitutional, and it caused quite a stir. If you want to know the details of that, look up 12 April 1861. There was also a time after 1865 where we learned that slavery was bad. We learned that slavery was bad for humanity as a whole. In fact, you could even go so far as to say that enslaving other humans is a crime against humanity. I don't think that's a hard case to make. Makes sense to me. But where we are now as a country, we're at a point in time where it appears as though we have forgotten that lesson. You see, our government is deeply financially entwined with the Chinese government, the Chinese Communist Party. The Chinese Communist Party is a regime that uses slave labor. Not only that, our government is profiting from slave labor. You might call them sanctions, and I'm sure a lot of people would, especially in the government, right? And politicians especially. Yeah, okay, sure. You can call it what you want. Yeah, we're sanctioning them. We're gonna punish them for using slave. No, bro. These Chinese companies have already accounted for the loss that they have to pay, and they have deemed the overall situation a profitable one. And it probably is. And the margins are probably not very thin. Now, this might sound familiar in other ways to you as well, because organized crime does engage in illegal activity. I mean, they do. We know that. Direct illegal activity. Sure. They also prop up legal businesses and skim off the top. They take their cut. I've watched The Sopranos. We know how it works. So if our government is skimming off the top of slave labor, what does that make them? I would even posit the idea that at least the mob doesn't use slave labor. Our government is criminal. Again, it always comes back to that for some reason, doesn't it? So what are we supposed to do? I mean, we can't just get rid of China, right? And even if it's not China, there are plenty of other authoritarian regimes, terrible ones, in the world that would love to take their place. Plenty. If we can't get rid of all the terrible regimes in the world, which we most certainly cannot, shouldn't our government be more concerned with doing the right thing, making sure that at least America's doing the right thing? I mean, isn't that why we elect our leaders? The right thing is not to have business dealings with a regime that is actively involved in the enslavement of an entire group of people based on their ethnic lineage. This should not be controversial. And apparently, with our government, that's too much to ask for. We got college kids protesting Israel's war on Hamas terrorists who are using their own civilian populations as human shields. Yet the Uyghur situation, it's been an ongoing atrocity for years. You barely hear a peep about it, man. Even in the news. Why is it not being reported on? What is it not? Is it not current thing enough for you? Maybe China's just misunderstood, right? Maybe nobody's perfect. Yeah. Whatever, man. I mean, you can justify it all you want. You can say what you want. China's an evil regime because slavery is evil. And I think a lot of people, know this. They know it to some extent because we've heard the stories about what is happening over there. Because I don't think anybody's actually forgotten. I think they just choose not to know it. The moral of the story, though, it doesn't really have anything to do with China. Like I said, we can't do anything with China. What we can do is realize that, communism is evil, and so is our government. The old adage that taxation is theft, in more ways than one, it turns out. Good day.